Peter McDermott. Members of this association have served in the Second World War and in all conflicts and theatres where the RAF has participated. Airfield defence. These airfield defence guys are quite a tough job. They've defended airfields from the Second World War through to Vietnam. And today, ADGs figure quite prominently in East Timor, and a small number have also served in training roles in Afghanistan.
Move into a group of RSL organisations, and they provide such a vital role and have done for so many decades, haven't they, for veterans and their families and support. And I'm sure there'll be quite a bit of debriefing going on at RSL clubs around Canberra this afternoon.
I'm sure quite a lot. We just saw them brief the Polish flag. A Polish veteran, Frank Kosto, served in North Africa as well as Italy.
In a prominent position down George Street, particularly for senior veterans, those who can no longer march. They're here to cheer their mates. They'll be right beside them on the doorstep, so to speak, and remember those who are no longer with us. It's amazing, the crowd seemed to have just increased dramatically in the last half hour or so. They're there to cheer the taxis, and as Bob said a moment ago, it's a marvellous gesture on behalf of all the taxi companies that they do donate their time in the Jeeps with their contingent, but they are ahead of Gascoyne.
Yes, Gascoyne. It's led today by Bob Wright and 85-year-old Ross Goulet, who served on Gascoyne in 1945. Ships that went deployed to the Middle East in 1939 to provide convoy escort duties in the Mediterranean, and they took part in the supply runs to Tobruk, and they're all rats of Tobruk.
And taking part today, and some of them will go around 2 or 3 times. And the RSL will be always pleased to hear of people and bands who like to march.
Yes, John, and with Quiberon coming up now, HMAS Quiberon, it's led today by 91-year-old Neil Imray of Hornsby. They provided anti-submarine escort and treat duties in the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. And in 1942, she sunk the Italian submarine Desi in the Mediterranean. And there's clearly one of the old diggers marching proudly. Served throughout the war and was the second Hobart, served in Vietnam on the gun line. And many of the men marching today are veterans of the second Hobart, Vietnam Hobart. And here's the third of the 3 DDGs, HMAS Brisbane. One served in Indian Ocean and the Eastern Mediterranean, and the second Brisbane served in Vietnam.
Yes, it's quite obvious that many of the World War II units are deteriorating in numbers due to age. And now have the commando squadrons of M and Z special units. They operated throughout Borneo and New Guinea. Yes, the 9th Division actually carried on to El Alamein and then came back to Australia, fought in New Guinea.
And we have the Papua New Guinea Infantry Battalions, formed from both the native Papuans and the Australians who lived in Papua New Guinea before World War II.
They have quite a range of battle honours also for the Pacific area.
Following them, we see the Jeeps.
Yes, nothing on this chap that I'm aware of.
It's certainly not the uniform he would have worn.
No, but he's certainly seen some service. Oh, goodness, we're back to the
Tobruk Association.
Anzac,
of course, this is
Tobruk.
their special year. 70 years since the landing.
Since the siege of Tobruk, that's right. Though we're looking at a ship which has, by coincidence, the name
of Tobruk.
Tobruk. Yes, you've got the Anzac and the Tobruk there, and you can see the areas in which those 2 vessels have served. But I don't know who their leader is. Someone who's turned to the cloth after I assume after his service in World War I. Hard to talk about there, I'm sure, for the FBSR.
HMAS Assault, Neil. This is the Naval Commando landing boat cruise.
Yes, as I said before, not all HMAS, His or Her Majesty's Australian ships, were necessarily sea-going vessels. This one in particular, well, not in particular, but this one, for example, HMAS Assault, was a training ship for the RAN, the Royal Australian Navy Commandos. And this was the training depot in Queensland for all of the landing boats that went ashore at Tarakan.
Now, this is the
like that.
Caulfield South Primary School Drum Corps. The musical director is Mr. Sandy Hood.
Yes, Sandy Hood and the folk from the Caulfield South. You hear that? Sandy Hood, thank you, and to all the folk from the Caulfield South Primary School Drum Corps with their 75 grade 5 and 6 students.
These are the ladies from the Australian Women's Land Army, and just behind them the Victorian Railways returned servicemen.
Right. Well, I'm glad we finally caught up with the rest of them.
Yes.
They're part of the women's services, which were very, very early in the piece. And I just caught a glimpse then of the Victorian Railways veterans, led as I think I managed to blurt out before, led by Graham Smith. Victorian Railways veterans, a very proud group with a history going back to 1919. And in Graham Smith's case, he was a first intake Nasho, and having done that piece to camera earlier on National Servicemen, Graham served with some of the lads that I spoke of.
The Commissionaires, the Corps of Commissionaires.
Todd McDougall, a former Army Lieutenant Colonel, leading them, and the Corps of Commissionaires, also very old, very proud. Yes, there they are now. I can see some there with their white hats. That's the Corps of Commissionaire folk, and their very distinctive badge on their sleeve.
So were seconded to the Navy. They served mainly in Australian waters. Valuable tasks, including one of them sinking one of the Jap subs that got into Sydney Harbour, the I-21. And what is it? Only last year, the I-24 was found off of North Sydney. I think these are the Fairmiles. That is very smallest vessels in the Royal Australian Navy, and of course very many of them. They used to say that they were so small that none of them had names because the names wouldn't fit on, so they just gave them numbers. But they were at ships like them were at the Commando raids and Dieppe,
and even at Tobruk too.
Tobruk, yes. Protected us, especially against German raiders. So they were equipped with naval guns, put on merchant ships, and look out against German raiders. They really had very little chance if they struck a ship like the Admiral Hipper or the Admiral Scheer, the German cruisers who were used as raiders. Perhaps a better chance in the disguised raiders that operated in the Pacific.